so let's do 3 questions and then we'll break. And then if you guys want to ask more questions, I will stick around. I'm not going anywhere.
Are you back on the competition mat or are you still injured?
So I just competed at ADCC in, what month are we in? September? In August. So I just had a bronze medal in ADCC in August. Yeah.
What do you tell the women that you teach about like saying no to roles or refusing to roll with a guy or refusing to roll with maybe a girl that is going very hard because she wants to compete and maybe her partner is just there to learn technique? Like, I know what I tell my girls, but I would just love a different point of view on what you tell yours.
Yeah. I think it's something that we talk about so much at women's camps, and it's a beautiful like time for us to kind of come together because it sometimes is uncomfortable to say in front of men. But I always just like view it as, I don't know, communication is key, like in all things, right? Like just speak up, use your voice. I think that sometimes it's easy to get very jaded and like angry in the jiu-jitsu world as a woman because you're like, fuck these guys, blah, blah, blah. But like, you know, like, okay, that's normal, understandable. Like, you know, ask people about like women's pay in jiu-jitsu. Like people get angry about a lot of stuff, and I'm not saying that the anger isn't warranted. I'm like a survivor of many things. Like I can really go there with people, but I just believe that there is a way to do it where it's a win-win for everybody. So what I mean by that, as far as like use your voice, use your language, is you can politely decline, you know? Like you can say like, oh no, thank you, I'm okay. You don't have to be like, I don't wanna roll with you. Like it's like, you know what I mean? Like, because nobody wants to create an uncomfortable environment for themselves in the gym either. I'm not saying some people don't deserve that. Don't get me wrong, like people are crazy. But I am a big fan of like creating the environment that you wanna be a part of. So I 100% like totally have the permission slip to roll with whoever you want and not roll with whoever you want. I believe that yes, we are like in a martial art and there is some, you know, hierarchy that's embedded into what we do. So like the whole like, oh, don't ask black belt to roll thing, like that gets out of hand. But I would say like it can be intimidating if a black belt male asks you to roll and you don't want to and you're like, oh, but they're a black belt, right? Or different things like that. So I just want to acknowledge that that's real instead of saying like, oh, it doesn't matter. And it's like, but we feel it. So it's important to say it out loud. Like the hierarchy exists. It can be very uncomfortable. As women, I think a lot of the times we have a tendency to want to make everyone around us comfortable and we don't want to, you know, hurt people's feelings. We're very sensitive to that. We're very compassionate and empathetic. So anyway, just basically, you know, I think we're probably on the same page. It's not super complicated. It's like, speak up for yourself, do it politely. You always have, and I don't say do it politely for the other person. I say that for yourself because it's like the environment that you want to have. So I say it all the time, like, oh, no, thank you. Like, or actually, I'm okay. Or, oh, you know what, I'm going to rest this round. Or, oh, I have someone I'm thinking about rolling with. And obviously, you know, you can get into the weeds of like, if it's a repeated thing, do you go to the instructor? And that's, I think, a different conversation. Like how, you know, do you handle something if it's a pattern? But yeah, I think people overcomplicate it, you know? I think that like we are voluntarily signing up to roll around on the ground with other people. And if you don't want to do that with somebody, don't do it. And one of the ways, like I think that also, and on top of that, I would add something that was a very hard lesson for me to learn is that in order, and some people, and this might not sound the best to everybody, but it's just my experience, especially as like a bigger, stronger girl and a black belt and a competitor and someone they think they can roll hard with and expect a lot out of. I learned that a lot of the time I had to learn how to protect my own body with people. And it wasn't always that people were just crazy and mean. And sometimes they were. But if I'm in a roll and I don't know if I can stop in the middle or I'm uncomfortable or they're pushing a weird way or they're being rough, how can I keep myself safe so that I'm not always gonna have to be a victim to that or susceptible to that? Now, I might be in a situation that I'm gonna give you a tangible example because I know this is kind of rambling. A tangible example would be if I am playing guard and I have a knee shield and someone's driving in my knee in a weird way that I feel like is gonna be twisty and they're using all their weight and their strength and I'm like, oh shit, I think I might get hurt, I'm gonna let them pass my guard. That is how I've learned to keep myself safe. And that's very hard on this girl's ego because I got a big ego and I like to win, right? And I have to, I'm for real, right? And I know a lot of people relate to that and I have to negotiate with her all the time. Like, do you want to be winning or do you want to have a knee that works? Like, let's be honest. Like, let's be honest. Like, let's be honest here. Like, I'm not the only one, right? So, with, let's call him John, okay? With John trying to smash me, about to twist my knee, John's gonna pass my guard because I'm gonna be here and I'm gonna be like, God damn it. And I'm gonna let him pass my guard and he's gonna pass my guard. Then I might be angry, he might be a total jerk, right? Maybe he's a total jerk. The match ends, I never have to roll with him again, but I didn't have to get hurt and I didn't have to be another story of someone who got roughed up by a man. And again, this is not saying that there aren't really rough, mean, bad people that are doing things they shouldn't do. That sucks. But I'm just talking about having some autonomy and some empowerment in the situation of like, what can I do to keep myself safe? And a lot of times it comes down to keeping myself safe instead of needing everyone around me to keep me safe. And then once I know better, I can do better. So once I know that person doesn't save me, then next time I can say no thank you. Or I can tell my instructor that I'd really prefer not to roll with that person. So hopefully some of that made sense and also didn't come across as like, oh, don't be a baby about it. Because I don't mean that at all. I mean like, it's a tough world out here and what we're doing is fucking hard. So we better learn like how to protect ourselves. And I think as girls here who like to train hard and we like to, you know, really go at it, sometimes we can get ourselves in situations that we didn't plan for, and then we have to adjust and go from there. Yeah, if you have any follow-up questions on that, I'll stop because I'm kind of rambling, but if you have any follow-up questions on that, feel free to come find me. There's so many different like intricate, like what if this, what if that, and like personal situations I'm happy to talk about. Hopefully that was helpful. Yes, here.
Okay, Ashley, hello. Speaking of knees, okay, so how do you get past like mentally of being injured? Because I feel like I can't do as much.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, but I feel like I can't do as much, and sometimes it's really frustrating. Yeah. So how do you work through that? Because I'm doing it, but I'm struggling.
Yeah, it's strange because I never thought I would have that many injuries. Like I was never that girl growing up, and then it just happened to be that I had two extreme ones back to back. So like my lower back and then my knee at ADCC in 2022. My back was right before that. So with both of those back to back, I have a lot of experience in this area. And I would say that, like, when did you hurt your knee, or how long ago?
March of this year.
March. Okay. So I'm not sure exactly what's going on with your knee or what's happening, but as far as the mental side of things, because so many of us can relate, we've had little things or big things or whatever. It is. There's so many pieces of it. So number one is, I think finding the balance of pushing yourself and then also lowering your expectations sometimes can be really empowering. Like, don't expect yourself to feel like you did in February or April or no, not April, January, February, right? So like give yourself grace and time too. And then also be like pushing yourself on a consistent basis. So it's very hard to define exactly the right path because I think the right path is different for everybody, but for the most part, I expected it to take a long time. I think like having realistic expectations of it's gonna take a while before I feel completely like myself was helpful, because in the beginning I kept thinking like week to week I was gonna feel so much better and it was gonna keep, and it wasn't happening, and then I was so frustrated and I felt like something was wrong with me, right? Instead of feeling like, oh wow, this is gonna take a long time and do what I can. So a couple of things mentally that really helped. I try to keep my schedule. So if I was gonna be at training, I would either go there and do what I could, or I'd go lift weights, or I'd do something, but I would like stay involved with my schedule so I could keep feeling like, okay, I'm an athlete, this is what I do, this is how I live my life. Two, I would spend a lot of time with the people that I would normally train with, whether that was going to training or seeing them after or whatever. And three, I would go to the training, and I think once you get injured more than once, especially, and you have a really high level of respect for your body, like kind of the knee shield thing that I was talking about, I let people, you could say, or I respected my boundaries of like where things kind of felt wonky to me really, really heavily, because I took my body's health really seriously. So I know that it's hard because this is kind of a combination of a lot of different things, but I would say that the tangible thing to do is it's really an inside job. Like it's really, I just hit the microphone. It's really an inside job, like deciding for you, like I would write about it. That's personally what I would do. I would write about it and decide like what are the things that are non-negotiables for me, like in my life, whether that is like a meditation practice or spending time with friends or training or whatever it is, and what are the non-negotiables for me. And this comes back to training, because for me, one of the non-negotiables was if I do not want to be re-injuring myself. Like I do not want to re-injure myself. So if that's a non-negotiable, then when I go into training, I have that in mind as like a boundary and a standard that I've set for myself. So now instead of feeling defeated, like, oh, I wish I could, why can't I move this way, or why can't I do this? It would be like, oh no, I'm upholding the boundary that I have myself. And that switches it from something that's happening to me like, oh no, I can't control this, is out of my control, to, oh, this is empowering because I'm doing what I said I was gonna do and I'm taking care of myself. So it's the same exact action, which is why it's kind of hard to explain, but it's a different mindset about it, where it's like, what am I doing for myself rather than why is this bad thing happening to me? And then knowing that this is a slower journey, but it's a more solid journey and it's a stronger foundation. So now I always tell people, like, actually, I have this thing that's lingering in my right, and my left knee is the one I injured really badly, right? My right knee, I had this lingering thing from years ago. That I still notice from time to time. My left knee, I don't even feel anymore. Like, I don't even think about it. It's not even, my left leg's stronger than it used to be. I'm way stronger than I used to be. So it's like, but it took 14 months for me to compete again. But I could have probably done it sooner and then probably got re-injured again. And we all have seen athletes who are on and off the mats with injuries constantly and they can't get healthy. And usually it has to do with not being able to conquer what's going on in here and in here, because I'm like, no, I need to do this. I'm so frustrated, and accept the feelings. They are frustrating. But instead of this is happening to me, it's I'm taking care of myself and these are my standards and I'm upholding them and I can feel high self-esteem in that. Self-esteem comes from esteemable acts, right? So training in a way where I accomplish something small, as far as, okay, I practice something that I'm not that good at but doesn't hurt my knee. Like, I can go home that day and feel like, okay, I did my job. Like, I view it as work. Like, I did my job today, and that feels good, and I feel good about me. So I know that that was like a lot of different things all over the place, but truly, I feel like it's a personal journey that you go on with an injury, and you have to write down what your non-negotiables are and what you're looking for so that you have a target. So then you can feel yourself getting closer to the target instead of this ambiguous, like, I think I'm getting better, kinda, you know? Like, that's frustrating for me. I can't, like, I need targets, you know, like I need something to aim for, or else I'm all over the place. So hopefully that's helpful, and if you have more specific questions, I'm happy to answer them later too. Yeah.
In a few weeks, I have a match against a girl who's like a lot more skilled than I am. I'm a blue belt, she's a brown belt, and it's my first time like going, like it's gonna be in like an alley and like the stage and thing. Wow. It's my first time doing it.
Yeah, that's exciting.
And so, and she's like active in the UFC right now. So like I've had moments of being like, this is amazing. I'm like excited for the data points and the experience, and then there's the moments where I'm like, what the fuck am I doing?
Yeah.
And I remember you talking about like sometimes it's not about who has the most skill, but the mental aspect of it. So if you could give me like something that was like, what would you tell someone if this was like your student, what would you tell them going into it to prep mentally for it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I not only was it what I would tell my student, but I've been in that situation myself many times too before, where I was going up against someone with more accolades, more skills, whatever it is. And I truly like a couple of things. One, I identify people like the David and Goliath thing, right? Like, one, I identify those stories and things I can recognize because it gives me proof and faith that it can happen, right? So first you have to believe that it can happen. So it's like, identify those. Like, there's so many examples in Jiu Jitsu I'm not thinking of right now, but people that had huge comeback wins, or they beat someone they weren't supposed to, or whatever, right? So I'd identify those so you can believe in it. The next thing is I would figure out how to identify yourself with that, right? So what do you need to tell yourself to help you believe that that can be you? So there's a couple ways you can do that, right? For me, mantras are very, very important. So like, I have a couple mantras that I use all the time. One is I can always win no matter what. Like, I have that in my head all the time. So if I get taken down or I get my guard passed or whatever it is, I can always win no matter what. Like, I practice that all the time. Another one, like that I say for me personally is like, I'm the fucking best. Like, that's one that is always in my head when I'm competing, like, I'm the fucking best, I'm the fucking best. So there's a couple different ones like you can choose that feel empowering to you, but I think what a lot of people fail to do is they fail to practice that in training. So it's not just for competition day, because our mental strength is a muscle, just like anything else. So instead of just expecting it to be there on competition day, practice it in training. So when you're going into training, like, treat it like you're about to go compete so that you get rehearsal with this, right? So that brings me to the third thing, which is visualization. So visualization, I always recommend, like, I have this program called Jiu Jitsu Accelerator that I work with clients from all over the world, and we do our online sessions, and visualization is one of the sections that we cover, and I do guided visualizations with them because we forget that we can do mental rehearsal of the thing that we're about to go do. Bless you. So you can sit in your car 5 minutes before training, so like, or whatever, or after, or whatever you want to do it. I recommend before you leave the house, and sit there for 5 minutes and close your eyes and take yourself through the entire competition experience, especially in an arena you've never been before, especially if it's your first time doing a big stage and like a whole thing, right? So it's like, close your eyes, imagine yourself going through the whole experience. What is it like when you get out of the car? What is it like when you walk in? And you might feel your nerves, and that's good because you're working through the anxiety before you even have to actually execute, right? So you're familiarizing yourself with the experience. So you're working through the anxiety, working through the news. You're walking in, okay, you see her, what does that feel like? You see the arena, what does that feel like? And then you go all the way through the match. So how, like, pick the match that you want. That's another piece. It's like, pick your game plan. Pick the match that you want. Now, rehearse that over and over and over. Rehearse it perfectly. Now, I find with visualization, sometimes my mind tries to take me out. And I'll, like, go to do something, and my mind will, like, show me that I did something else. And then I have to practice, like, oh, shit, what if that does happen? Okay, if I got taken down, now what am I going to do? And it's like a video game in your head. And you visualize yourself going through it. And then, all the way to the end, you submit her, you win, whatever. Raise your hand. How does that feel? Feel that. Smell it. Hear it, right? What do you see out there? Is your coach there? Like, rehearse this thing and then do that for 5 minutes or however long it takes you. Go into training, try to create that same exact thing. So what are the mantras that you're saying to yourself to help bring that experience to life, and then try to make it happen with your training partners. Okay, so this is a very simple process. Most people do not have the discipline to do it. They just don't. They don't want to do it. I don't know if it's because it's the anxiety, they don't want to I'm not sure. I mean, I battle with it myself, but I'm usually pretty disciplined about this, and it's a big part of what I do. So those are the things that I would do every single day that you're training. Now, on the last week of before your match, or like the last couple days of training before your match, I would do the same exact thing, except for the people that you train with, make them people that you can fuck up. So right before, it's like you are going through your game plan, but you're killing these people, right? And communicate with your coaches as much as you need to, but it should be fun, it should be empowering, it should feel good, so that by the time you walk into that arena, it's like, who is that? Yeah. Like, I'm me. Like, I'm her. Like, like I am her. I am her. And I've seen her do this so many times, and then I did it in practice 2 days ago, and like, no one can fuck with me. And then you have the mantras that sink in that experience, and then you have your music that you listen to that sinks in that experience, and you create the experience before it happens. And then the more you practice that, it's like, I mean, yes, have extreme belief, and then also be like, you know what, and if I lose, who fucking cares?
Yeah.
Like, nobody actually cares. Yeah. And I'm barely even gonna remember this when I'm trying to win black belt world titles, right? It's like, it's true. Because I think back to, like, it's important. Treat things like they are important, but then don't take them too heavily with you, right?
I've lost somewhere around like 110 pounds. And thank you. But now I'm like athletic, and I'm looking for like this journey. And something that I'm kind of facing is like, when I'm signing up for matches and I'm competing, because I have done that, it's like being comfortable with like the weight that I am now, or like the pressure of like cutting weight to get smaller. And I've kind of been like trying to get out of the mindset of like, I need to be smaller. I need to take up less space. I need to like shrink myself. And so like, I know that you've talked about like eating and like body and like the mindset. How do you get comfortable with like where you are and knowing that this is okay, and not striving for like, I need to be something else? And because like in my mind, I try to be like, oh, if I'm smaller, then I face smaller women, but I want to face women that are strong and powerful and stand in it and be comfortable here.
I can't speak for anyone else. I don't think anyone else, but definitely for me, like, no one's an expert on this, right? Like, on landing in the exact right place and then doing it perfectly 365 days a year, right? So I totally understand what you're saying about you're at a weight that didn't feel right for you. You lost a lot of that weight, and now you're like, well, where does it end, right? Like, when do I stop? Or like, do I keep going, or do I stay here, or what? For me, there is an aspect of spirituality involved, because I feel like sometimes my human brain like will play tricks on me, so I kind of go into more of like a, I don't know, you can use whatever word works for you, like universe, God, people use like whatever, but for me it's like my highest self is another way to say it, like if that connects more with some people. But I try to connect to that and feel like, where am I actually going to feel like I can be of the most service to other people, and usually that includes like shining my brightest, like where can I shine my brightest, where can I feel my best, and if I can be guided towards like being in that size, like that would be great, like physically, if I can have the physical representation of what that is, that would be great. So I know that's kind of like woo-woo, not super tangible, but that's kind of where I have to go with it, because the second I start trying to fit myself into a certain weight class, I get really swayed by the outside world, whether that's people thinking that like heavyweight is better than super heavy, or whatever it is, you know? So, okay, so going back to like what to actually figure out, I have always felt that the place I can live my happiest life is the place that I should be competing at. And because usually that means I feel like the most fueled, the most energized, I'm sleeping really well, my mental health is really strong, and wherever that is where I'm training is probably going to give me the best opportunity to compete well, right? So there have been times where I've been much leaner than I am, like 25 pounds lighter and a six-pack and the whole thing, and I wasn't very happy. And that's not everybody. Some people are there and they're like, man, I feel fucking great. And I'm like, all power to you, for sure. I've also been 20 pounds heavier, and that is also not right for me because I don't feel my best there. I feel a little slower. I feel, you know, so like right now, anywhere in this 10-pound range that I'm in right now is typically where I feel my best. And that's not going to match everybody else, but it's taken some trial and error to figure out. So again, where I feel the happiest, the healthiest, where I'm having my best training sessions, I look around in my life and I take inventory, like, are my relationships going well? Am I being a person that I'm proud of? And all of these things that may not seem related to jiu-jitsu are because jiu-jitsu is related to my life. And I show up on the mats as the person that I am in here, and here, and in here, right? And in here, in my power. So that would be the answers for me is like, where am I living my happiest life is where I kind of end up on the mats. And I usually feel that I'm trying to feel well, treat my body well, recover well, train hard, have fun, enjoy my life, then my weight will end up wherever it needs to end up. Like I've been trending down a little bit right now, and I kind of saying like, I don't know where it's gonna stop, but when I start trying to control, for me, when I start trying to control my weight, when I'm watching the number like, oh, if I just do this, then it'll go down. That's not happiest life for me. If I'm living my happiest life like I am right now and it's starting to go down on its own, okay, like God, universe, spirit, whatever you want to call it, it's taking care of that for me. It's not really Kendall's job because when Kendall tries to take control of that, it gets weird, you know, that's my experience. So hopefully that helps. That way. If we just want to say a one-liner, my weight is nobody's fucking business. Like me, because you're the one who has to go out there and compete. You're the one who's eating, you're the one who's sleeping, you're the one who's training, you're the one who's lifting weights. None of their business. And you can politely say, I'm actually really happy where I'm at, thank you. Like, you know, like kind of the training thing. You don't have to get in a fight with them. Why? To prove what? They don't care that much, you know? So it's like, oh, I'm actually really good where I'm at, thank you. That's it. Yeah, that's my suggestion.
I feel like I don't feel at home at either of my gyms. So like I've trained between two gyms, and then and they're a little off with cross training. Like, how do you feel about cross training between gyms? And like, what's your suggestion for like a mindset? Since I feel like I just haven't found like my home gym yet, where I feel like 3 years.
A couple of things. I'm not anti-cross training. I think cross training can be really great. I think that picking and choosing like the environments that you're in is important as far as like safe training partners and all that, but it doesn't sound like that's really the issue. Like you kind of have two places that you like. I would say that it is, in my experience, very important to, okay, I train at two places right now because I moved in with my boyfriend and he lives 2 hours away from the schools that I own. So that's been tough because I train there and I love the people there, and then I train at my schools and I love the people there, right? It's difficult, but I would say that having a lot of clarity around like who is promoting you, who is coaching you at tournaments, who is your like number one team, I do think there's a lot of benefit in that for everybody all around. One, they feel a sense of connection of like, oh, this is my student, and there's a lot of value in that because we do work in a hierarchical environment where there's a teacher and a student, right? And then I also think for you as a student, or for me as a student, there's a lot of value in that as well because you have like kind of your go-to person that you know is watching your promotions and all of that, right? That's being said, I think it's great if you have, it's a good problem to have multiple people and multiple schools that you like training at, but as long as you're openly like communicative about it and just tell the truth, I think people get sticky with cross training when they start being sneaky and kind of like, and I understand that it's because oftentimes they feel like they have to or people are gonna be upset or whatever, but I'm a big fan of like, I go where I can be true. I go to the places I feel like I can tell the truth and be myself. So like I train at two places right now. There's no secrets. They all know everything. I know who promotes me. I know, you know, like I have my thing set up, and it's not always perfect, and there's pros and cons to all of it, but it works for me. But I do think picking at the end of the day, like a home place, is really important for those things. And then if you're going to be training other places, just being honest about that and communicative. And if it's something, if it's like you can't be honest about it, then that would be something where I'm like, oh well, maybe I'm not in the right place. Yeah. Honestly, I mean, like the hard truth about jiu-jitsu, people don't like this, but sometimes you do have to choose. And I'm not saying that's your situation, but sometimes you do have to choose because you might not think there's any problem with it, but if the people that you're around do, it's not your, Like, it's not our gym, right? Like, if I don't own the gym, it's not always my choice. So then, what's the most empowering thing that I can do? Choose what's best for me and choose singularly if I'm being forced to choose singularly, right? Like, if someone, for example, was training full-time in my gym and training full-time at, like, whatever, my greatest enemy. I don't have this situation, but just say I did. And I needed them to choose, I would probably be like fully supportive of whatever they want to do, but I'm happier that they make a choice instead of being in both because it would cause problems with the gym. I'm not even saying I have this situation or that that's your situation at all. I'm just providing another example of like, maybe cross-train, maybe don't, but like if you have to choose, then make the choice that works best for you. If you could do both at the same time, great. That's awesome because it sounds like that's what you want to do. But I think just being communicative and honest with the people who own the gym is the best bet because it cuts out most of the bullshit and it helps it happen faster instead of dragging out for a long period of time where resentment build or weird situations start to happen. Yeah. And it's hard. And look, I'm not saying that I agree with that philosophy. But what I'm saying is if someone runs a gym that way and that's their philosophy, they're allowed. So, you know what I mean? So then, and I'm not saying like you're saying otherwise, but it's just to illustrate like, oh, it gives you your power back because you're like, oh, well, I can choose if I want to do that or not. And if you don't want to do that, you don't have to do it. You know, but it is hard, and I do have compassion for it because it's like when you build relationships with people, then it's sticky. Yeah.
Actually, so I used to train at a gym for quite a few years that ultimately I ended up leaving because I didn't feel safe or comfortable there anymore. And they had a system where when you signed in online, you could see everybody who was signed in. And I used to choose my classes accordingly based off of what training partners I felt safe with. And if there wasn't one that I did, I would not go to that class. And now I'm at a new gym where I don't have that system, and I feel very safe there, but I'm having trouble sometimes if I don't know that I'm going to have a partner that I feel comfortable with. Sometimes I find I deal with like anxiety about going to the class at all. So I'm wondering if you have any advice on how you can like get over that hump.
Yeah, that's really hard. I think that a lot of people deal with that level of like anxiety or nerves going into a gym, not sure like who's going to be there or what the training's going to be like. But I would say that for me, because okay, imagine like I teach a lot of seminars, right? So I go around and teach seminar and it's exactly that situation because usually I train after my seminars and a lot of times it's mostly men. So I'm like, who am I going to train with? Like, what's it going to be, you know? So a couple things with that is one, like learning to how can I feel create the safest home for myself, right? You obviously have a lot of experience, so you've already done some of this. It's like, okay, how do I keep myself safe in certain positions, or how do I say no thank you if someone asks me to roll, those kinds of things. But continuing to come back to the stronger you feel in your sense of self, the less the outside environment matters. You know what I mean? Doesn't mean it doesn't matter at all, let's be honest, right? We all want to have those good partners, but it matters less. Like it takes over our ability to go train less. So I think also the more you practice it, going even when you're scared or like not sure, you find new training partners because you're forced to go with people you don't really know very well, and like the awkward like person doesn't talk very much, and then all of a sudden you break the ice a little bit and you kind of get into it's like trying new moves. You like get into the groove a little bit of like, okay, this person's not so bad, and then you kind of build your roster of like, oh, if that person's there, I kind of know them, you know. So it's like you build it over time instead of relying on having like a very select certain amount of people. You build your network a little bit in there, and then you can start to feel more comfortable. And then also going back to communication, if you go to a class and say it's a small class, say there's 8 people, and all 8 people, you're like, no. And you go to your instructor, maybe not right then, but maybe you prep them with this conversation. You can even say like, hey, you know, I was noticing like occasionally I come into class and I get a little nervous because like these guys are kind of big or I've had bad experiences. In that situation, like, what do you suggest that I do? Like, would you suggest that? And ask them, because it's their class, they're leading the class, they're supposed to be able to help with this stuff, you know? Like, that's part of our job as teachers. So you could ask them and say, like, should I just drill with them? And then would you be open to sparring with me? Would that be okay? Like, you can kind of have these conversations. I think there's a lot of ways to go about it, but the most important thing is break the ice with yourself of like, that's gonna stop me from going. Because once you get there, there's all sorts of ways that you can have solutions, whether that's taking care of yourself physically in a role, or training with a new person that you don't know very well yet, or talking to your instructor. There's a lot of ways to do it, and the more you do it, the stronger you get at it, and the less scary it feels too. Yeah. Like in seminars, let's give you one last example. In seminars, usually when I teach like a co-ed seminar, I stand at the front, and right before the sparring starts, I'll say, hey guys, super excited to train with everybody. Just wanted to give you guys a heads up. Like, I do compete for a living. My body is my job. So if I say no thank you, please don't be offended. Or if we're training, like, you know, I want to train hard with everybody, but just, you know, make sure we're not being like super crazy or anything like that. That took me a long time to have the courage to say that because it was really hard on my ego. I didn't want people to think I wasn't tough or I didn't want to train hard. So I'm just explaining the muscle thing of like, the more you do it, now I don't care, you know, the more you do it, and it's because the easier it gets, and it's because I have a stronger sense of self. The more confident you feel that you're doing those things for the right reasons, and you can stop caring a little bit about like, are people gonna think of a baby or a weenie or whatever, or like, oh yeah, girls in jiu-jitsu, whatever it is. It's like, the easier it gets to do. And that's the gift you can give yourself that's really empowering, I think. Yeah.
When I started watching jiu-jitsu, when I first started like competing, like training regularly, I saw Maggie, Fia, Nathalie, and then I saw you. And then I saw like your Instagram, and I was like, finally, someone my age, similar to my body size. Like I was like, holy shit, there are people like me. And then ADCC, I saw you got injured. I have a shit knee. Always has been really bad. I was a kid. When you got injured and you were transitioning into trying to continue training and continue competing, was there anything that you think, yoga, cold plunges, Pilates, anything that helped your mobility?
Strength training. And it took a lot of discipline to realize that the way that I was lifting before wasn't the best thing for my knee. Or not really, like it wasn't making my knee worse in any way, but I mean like what I needed to get better wasn't like, I wish it was just like massage and like cryo and stuff. It was work. It was a lot of work. And so my partner is a muscle activation therapist, and so I started working with him around my knee, and it was pretty basic, simple stuff, but a lot of it, and same with my back when my back was injured. It was a lot of like isolated quad work. It was a lot of like isolated hamstring work. It was a lot of like tib fib stuff here. Like there were so many things that I did that were strength training based and physical therapy based. And I think what most people miss, including what I used to miss in healing injuries, is they want to do PT for a couple weeks and then they want to go back to their normal life. Sound familiar? And I do a lot of my PT stuff every time I exercise now, still, for my back and my knee. It's part of my life. It's part of my routine. A little less over time when things have gotten stronger, but even now still, like the way that I lift, I incorporate those things into whatever strength training I want to do, either as warm-up or as accessory work or whatever. It's just part of my life. So I've integrated injury prevention into my life instead of only using it as like an emergency tool when something's on fire. So that's a lot of core work, a lot of glute work, a lot of different things like that. And then basics, you know, sleeping enough. Also being careful when I'm training. Like if I'm in a weird position, like I said, let your guard get passed, let yourself get taken out. It's not worth it. It's just not worth it. So that kind of stuff, like preventing, it's like if you have a paper cut, right? The more you like pull on it like this, it's gonna take forever to heal back up. So it's not worth the little like tweak that I'm gonna have in training. Like the less I can avoid that, the stronger it gets over time. So now I feel like my knees are very strong, my back too, where if I have a little tweak or something's weird, I'm probably gonna be better in like 48 hours because my body's stronger instead of like, oh, now it's gonna take me so long to recover. So I would honestly like try to find a good physical therapist or a good strength trainer who has a lot of experience in injury prevention specifically, and then have the discipline to incorporate that in your routine on a weekly basis, like every time that you exercise, whether that's before jiu-jitsu or lifting weights or cardio or whatever it is that you're doing. That's given me such a better relationship with my body too, where now like I totally get what you're saying with like my knee or it's bad or I re-injure it all the time. I feel like now I'm at the point where okay, so here's an example. Earlier, I was sitting like this, right? I have this weird thing in my knee that acts up sometimes. I didn't sleep very well the last 2 nights. My body's kind of like whatever. As soon as I felt like a little pressure, I was like, oh, I'm just gonna kind of like sit differently. Because you start to get to know your body in such an intimate way where I might have just saved myself from getting hurt in 2 weeks. Who knows? Like, who knows, you know? So, a lot of PT. A lot of physical therapy. And again, like, a lot of discipline. I never feel like doing it, almost, you know, but it's just like it's like brushing my teeth. Like I just know that that's part of my life now, so I just do it. And I feel really good about myself when I do it, and it boosts my self-esteem and it boosts my sense of self because I'm like, oh, I'm taking really good care of myself. It's kind of like what I was telling someone else earlier about injuries. It's like decide what my priorities are and then feel actions to support those. Yeah. So a lot of physical therapy, a lot of lifting. I did see an acupuncturist and do some dry needling for a while. I think that was helpful. I have a really great dry needle guy. I like massage a lot, but I wouldn't attribute my recovery to those. I would attribute my recovery to physical therapy and strength training. Like, I think most of the time, injury recovery is rest and work. And people want, including me, someone else to come do it for them with some kind of modality. And it's like a lot of the time, it's me. It's me that, I got to do the work. And especially because after that PT ends, after 6 weeks or whatever, I'm still stuck with me. So, like, I still got to, or after I leave the massage or whatever, like, I'm still stuck with me. So now what am I going to do? Yeah. So, but it's like a lifelong process, I think, of taking care of yourself. Yeah.
I love the underhook. It's really neat. I have a habit of going at the hip, though.
Yeah.
It did feel stronger going on that. I haven't. Is there a reason? Like, do you ever go to that hip, or is that?
It'd be for different purposes. Like, if I wanted to body lock, I would go to the hip. But I probably wouldn't go to the hip to attack anywhere else, personally. Because it makes it susceptible to the wizard. Because my elbow's lower now, rather than being here.
And then also you said something about an inside trip from that position.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So the inside, have you done an inside trip before?
Yeah, I've done an inside trip, but I liked, I think I've done a lot of the takedowns that you did today, but, you gave such great detail,
Yeah.
changed them all
Yeah.
in effective ways. Yeah.
Thanks. So the inside trip is very simple. What happens is I have the underhook, and people will try to square up with you. And when they square up with you, see if I can find this video. When they square up with you, if I'm on this left side, they're going to step forward with their left foot, right? They're here, okay? So I have the underhook. This is their left foot. They're here originally. This is their left foot. Now they're squaring up with me because they're looking for an underhook with their left hand, and they're going to step here. As soon as they step there, my right foot goes in. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I can show
Goes
you.
right in between there.
And you start to square up with me here. This is when I come in. That way. It's honestly so easy. It's so ridiculously easy.
Underhook is like the home base. But if you have that, but they've postured up, are you still holding on to that and then trying to break their head back down? Or just working
If I'm going to posture up, I'm typically going to go to the body, like a body lock or the back, or I'm going to grab a snatch single because now they've exposed their leg and their back to me. Yeah. It depends, if I want the head, but like I said, I try not to force things that aren't there, right? So if they posture up, I'm typically going to look for one of the opportunities that are available to me. And then if they defend that by backing their hips out and they get lower, then I'll go for the head. Yeah, good question.
You mentioned kind of in the bigger Q&A portion, how easy it is to get kind of jaded, especially as a woman in jiu-jitsu. I'm starting to feel like I experience a lot of that. And I've tried to take a break, take myself on vacation, but it's really, really every single time I go to jiu-jitsu, I get really, really stressed out, and it just doesn't feel like a positive thing for me right now.
It's a really hard thing to do when you're feeling low, but I always advise people, and it's what I try to do myself, that when I'm not feeling great in my environment, I try to think of the ways that I can impact my environment instead of being instead of being vulnerable to my environment or being controlled by my environment. And again, it's not to say that there aren't frustrating things or things people do wrong or say or whatever, or to take away the experiences that you've had. So I just want to make that really clear. It's not to say why don't you just, I get it, stuff's hard, for sure, stuff's really hard. But at some point you have to make a choice. I'm either going to keep having this experience, 1, change gyms, 2, but the grass isn't always greener, right? I'm going to quit jiu-jitsu, okay, that's 3. Or 4, I'm going to impact my environment to make this a place that I really want to be, or try, at least do my best to try, right? So those are kind of our options, right? I'm not saying it's fair, but it's just reality. That's just true. And it's funny because I remember when I started training at my boyfriend, I love those people. They're so amazing. But I was really used to one thing. And then I move and I'm this is not really what I'm used to. The training philosophy, it's different. It's very different. And again, I love the individuals, but it's different. And so I had to have multiple conversations, and I just felt every time I walked in the gym, I was how can I make this a place that I want to be? How can I bring positive energy in here? How can I make more friends? How can I connect with these people? How can I be open and curious to learning about the way they do things? Because that creates a more fun experience for me to view it like that, like of curiosity and fun and excitement, instead of being like, oh, what are we gonna do today? Not that I even had, I'm like, Chris, if you're watching, just kidding. Not even that that's like what was happening, but anyway, you're obviously having a different experience. It's a little more negative. So again, looking at the choices and then just being in reality of like, okay, I'm gonna acknowledge that this is what I'm feeling. I'm gonna let myself feel that stuff because that's hard, it's necessary. I don't wanna act like it's not real. But at the end of the day, here are my choices. What am I gonna go with? And then just kind of like, you know, I believe like the balance between like the masculine and feminine that we all have. Like our feminine is being able to, is very generalized, but it'll illustrate a point. My feminine is like, you know, letting myself feel these things. I'm being vulnerable. I'm talking about it with my girlfriend. I'm talking about people who are safe, not like going and, you know, saying it at the gym, like suscepting myself. Yeah, or like even like people in your gym, there might be people that are comfortable, you're comfortable talking to, and then other people, like, you know how like sometimes oversharing can be self-harm? Like I've been in situations like that so many times. So I'm saying that to like, okay, so you do that, you have your thing, but then you put your masculine kind of self in the driver's seat and you say, okay, now I'm gonna give myself some structure, I'm gonna give myself some hard decisions that I have to make, and I'm gonna have the discipline to go do this and impact my environment this way and see what happens as an experiment. And we don't have to get over, it doesn't have to be forever. That's the thing too, like it's not forever. Maybe you do it for a day and things get a tiny bit better. And maybe do it for a week, and then maybe you do it for months and it's actually worse. And then you're like, okay, now I'm actually ready. Maybe I will change gyms, right? Like these are all, there's so many different paths you can take, but I just find that that is a way that you can actually feel powerful instead of vulnerable in this situation. And then you can manage your emotional experience in safe environments too, so that you're building a community for yourself that you look forward to being inside. You know what I mean? Yeah. I'm sorry it hasn't been easy though. And most people, I will say, go through some sort of period like this at some point, and you're really not alone. People go through this. The difference is some people leave jiu-jitsu. Some people keep switching gyms every year because they just like can't, and that's not a shame. I'm not shaming anybody. I'm just saying that happens. And some people try to make their home the grass that's greener. And sometimes it works out for people, sometimes it doesn't. But you're definitely not alone. It's a common thing. What we do is so intimate. It's hard. Yeah.
I will come back home. I will maybe try with ladies, but I will see big guy in front of me, and I'm like, it's not gonna work. What's she gonna? I'm like losing mentally, you know. Yeah. Guy on the same skill level, but big and whatever. Like, what would be your advice?
Well, it's understandable that you practice different things on different people, right? I think that's fine. Like, look, if you practice this on people your size and you get excellent at it, then you practice on people that are bigger, and then you kind of go up the food chain, right? But you don't have to like be the same level at same techniques on every single kind of training partner. That's a really hard expectation to meet, and you're setting yourself up to feel disappointed in yourself, right? That's not very like loving to do to yourself, like to set that expectation up where you're gonna fall because you're not gonna meet it. So I think it's totally fine to choose training partners you want to try that kind of stuff on, and then have different goals for different kinds of training partners. And that's cool. Awesome.